Mm.
Hello and welcome to the next episode of Two Girls Talk Transits. Today we're reviewing the astrology from February 2nd through February 8th, 2025, and we're your host. I'm Maddie.
And I'm Kaleigh.
Welcome back. So we are coming off like 2 really busy weeks, and this week is actually, I think, relatively softer and more flowing and more positive, relatively, but that's good. We'll start off on February 3rd, which is that Monday. Mercury in Aquarius will trine Jupiter in Gemini. So those two are helpful for like mental activities, for reasoning, problem solving, and feeling good in the social sphere, or at least generating more activity in the social spheres, I think.
Yeah, I could see that. I think too, like making that trine aspect, we're kind of like wrapping up the information about like what Jupiter retrograde was about and kind of like what it brought in for us. Um, because Jupiter is about to station direct later in the week. So I think this will be like one of the final aspects that we get to Jupiter. So I think it will be kind of like a little farewell to that cycle.
Right. And the last new moon we had, so the new moon in Aquarius, we had on January 29th. That new moon, if we remember, was in a trine to Jupiter and the sun trine Jupiter. So it may also kind of stem back to that new moon if you were like setting intentions at that time, or if you were like, trying to start a new direction for yourself that feels more expansive and more hopeful. Mercury may actually come in and be planning or organizing things from that new moon, or like, okay, let's write this down, let's get this straightened up. And yeah, Jupiter is moving really slow. Sometimes that's not, I mean, like in traditional astrology, that's not really positive because a planet moving faster is better, but it's moving slow to go direct, which is much more positive.
Right, right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it could also bring like some incoming information. You could get, whenever Jupiter makes an aspect to Mercury, we could get new conversations or we could hear back from jobs or like you said, if you had planted any seeds about like a direction you wanted to go into, hearings like some news about that, I think wouldn't be out of the ordinary.
Yeah, yeah, getting more positive news or having more positive conversations about things that have probably been stagnant or slower, they may
Mm-hmm.
start to pick up. Like I've noticed for myself a lot of like the Jupiter areas, my house has just kind of been like slowing down a lot, and now maybe there's like a change of direction coming up. So there's a change of the fortune and change of like the optimism flowing back in.
Yeah, that'll be good. I mean, we could all use a little bit of that.
Right. But also on the February 3rd, that Monday, Mars is in Cancer still, obviously, where it will be for freaking forever, but it will be squaring Chiron in Aries. So there's like a womb with slowness. Like I just think February is all these ideas because we're in Aquarius season and we want to push forward a new agenda. We want ideas move faster, air moves faster, but our actions are still like way far behind, you know? They're not in alignment with where our brain is.
Yeah, I think we're all feeling that probably to some degree, that, that progressive slowness, that none of us can really stand.
Some people like it.
Really? Who? If you if you like it, please comment. Let us know why.
I mean, I think when I posted on TikTok, a lot of people didn't like Mars and Leo actually, and I was like, okay.
Really?
But yeah, there was a couple people that were like enjoyed the Mars and Cancer period about more than Mars and Leo. So I mean, maybe it just depends on your natural chart and progression. Like we both have angular Mars, so I think we both like a lot more movement and
True.
activity in our lives, you
Yeah.
know? And
Mm-hmm.
people who don't have that maybe don't do well when there's a lot of movement and activity in a really hot Mars. And so when Mars is slow, maybe they prefer that. Like, I think it depends on like your natal chart.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point to make. Can also be like, what is your relationship to like fire elements too? If you don't like
Mhm.
things to be like super fiery and quick, you might appreciate like the slowdown. But yeah, I never had thought about that we both have angular Mars. That's probably like running the show in a way. Like we need to get
Yeah.
done. Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, that's why we like just do things. And so like I don't
Really?
think a lot of people do that all the time, you know?
Yeah, so if you're not like an angular Mars or don't have Mars prominent, have compassion for your your
Yeah.
friends who like to take things easier.
Yeah, so it's a both, but I think anyway on the third, there's still a womb that comes up. Like, it's an interesting mix of astrology because with Mercury trining Jupiter, that's more positive for mental activities and problem solving and like creating new ideas. But then it's like, okay, how do I actually make this happen? And then
Mm-hmm.
you realize, like, oh God, I need more self-confidence, or I need to trust this, or I need more time, or I actually need to put forth a lot of action and output to actually make this happen. And there may be that womb that comes up with that.
Oh yeah, that's for sure. I mean, we have been getting comfortable with that Chiron and Aries for a really long time. So it's probably going to be a familiar wound, one that's come up various times. But yeah, I mean, all's good with information. We're on planet Earth to learn and learn about ourselves. So, we can learn how to have compassion in that moment.
Yeah, so just notice, like, I think it's just good to note like what you want to plan and what you want to zero out in, and then know that the action piece may come later, like later being the spring, but like may come later, like once Mars goes direct and once there's more momentum with that planet. But it's okay to just have these ideas floating around, but also don't get too overwhelmed with the ideas. Like trines are still trines, they're flowing sometimes too much. You have to remember to cut them off if it's like too much going on.
Yeah, yeah. I think like a big theme for me with like Mars retrograde has been like allowing things in that liminal space. Like you said, have ideas floating around, but not really like take action on those. So I think it's okay to be in that like information gathering stage for a bit. And Mars will go direct. It was the 23rd, right?
Yeah, so later in February.
Yeah, later in February, and I think we'll all get a little bit of like life back into us. But yeah, for those of you who aren't liking Mars and Leo, maybe that won't be positive, but nonetheless, it'll be I think a better time to take those actions that have kind of been floating around.
Exactly. And I mean, Aries will definitely be a big theme for this year, this spring, this month. Venus enters Aries on Tuesday, the February 4th, and she's going to be there for a while.
Hmm.
And she's going to station retrograde there in March. So we're going to feel a lot with Aries. And then we have our last eclipse in Aries. So there's still a lot to do in that sign. And it's all going to be happening with a Mars in Cancer, like Mars ruling it happening in Cancer. So I don't like that, but
Yeah, I think we're gonna feel like kind of at odds or like challenged in that
right, because
way.
those two signs square each other first off. And then like, so there's always this conflict with that square. And then also Mars is just not well resourced in Cancer. He's just not. He's too busy protecting things like the home and the family and like your body. And then Aries is like, new ideas, let's create, let's do these things, let's have passion. And it's like Mars is like, I gotta like fight this fire over at my house first, you
Mm-hmm.
know?
Yeah, or it's just like not having like clear direction on how to like let that energy out. But yeah, it'll be an interesting time to see how like that Aries in particular like plays a role in your personal chart.
Mm,
I'm interested to see how it comes up. But
yeah,
it's kind of right in time too, and it always happens like this somehow or another, but the planets always line up with like the shifting of the seasons.
right.
Yeah, so we have like spring starting in like a month and a half. Was that about right? A month and a half? Yeah.
It starts March 21st.
21st, right? And we're at the end.
Yeah, about a month and a half.
Yeah, month and three
Yeah.
weeks or something. Yeah.
Like, yeah, Pisces season is like that mutable period where we start to shift.
Hmm.
And yeah, I mean, Venus and Aries, though, is definitely going to be a very, I always think the shift from Venus and Pisces to Venus and Aries is like really loud because she goes from being exalted to in detriment.
Right.
But it speaks a lot to actions too. Like an exalted Venus is more about flow and steadiness and ease, and where there's ease. Like a real strong Venus person isn't someone who is often putting themselves at high risk situations or like high intensity situations all the time. They like softness and ease generally in their day to day. But then if you put that Venus into Aries, like all of a sudden she's like, okay, I'm going here to fight. Like let's make fighting attractive. Like let's make our actions more attractive. So there's like all of a sudden like you get like a fire under your ass almost.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah, like a stronger Venus placement would want like things to be comfortable,
Right.
and themselves to be comfortable. Yeah, but we're kind of like thrown out of that and like we're not able to be comfortable in that moment, you know? Yeah.
You just have to find like comfort in a different way. Like in Aries, the comfort comes from actually accomplishing things, maybe, or like
Hmm.
actually go getting and like, disrupting sort of problems, like actually going and attacking problems, or like just taking more initiative and taking more action. Um, I was listening the astrology podcast, Chris Brennan, my homie, I love him. He launched like a 7 hour podcast on Venus and Aries.
Oh my goodness, I haven't seen that one yet.
It was just out, and it's like insanely long, but it's about Venus and Aries and also Venus retrograde in Aries. And a lot of the themes, though, like to summarize some of it, if you don't want to dedicate 7 hours to your life learning, but it's really good information. Um, it's just like, a lot of women being put in high,
Mm.
intensity positions or high power situations, and oftentimes like in an uncomfortable way, like being brought to the surface from like challenging things. And then also having that reviewed. It's just like, the darker side of society, the darker side of Venus, so like social workers, or like sex workers being brought up to heights, or like, things like that, like darker elements of Venus being brought up because that's necessary for that time period to push forward some way.
That's very interesting. Yeah, because Venus is like representational of women, and then
Right.
in a sign that is ruled by Mars, which
Men.
is representational of men, yeah, you have this like element where maybe it's like women existing in a man's world, and we're understanding like the inner workings of that. Like,
No, that's a really good way to put it, because that's
yeah,
exactly like what a lot of the themes were.
yeah. I mean, I think about that a lot, actually. You know,
Yeah.
there was this Beyonce song that I was listening to today, and it was like talking about feminism and how, feminism is like like we're trying to make women and men equal on all like fronts, on like pay and
Mhm.
living and things like this. Um, but when we do that, we kind of like eliminate the possibility for like women to be able to exist differently from men.
Right.
Yeah, so feminism in a way, like I don't want to like talk about something I don't know too much about, but is like a bit counterproductive sometimes because we're stripping ourselves away of like our natural rhythms, if we are always searching for equality, you know.
And it's like, and it kind of speaks to how like a detriment planet is, or like planets in detriment are. It like Venus in Aries can't just be Venus. She can't just be a woman in a man's face and just go about that. Like she has to perform actions differently. So like planets in detriment have to do things differently, and they have to kind of go about it in a unique sense of way to meet that sign, that environment's requirements, right? So like a Venus in Aries, she can't just go in and be so soft and feminine and like demand equality in that
Yeah,
way.
she's not allowed. Yeah.
Right. She has to
Hmm.
come in with more masculine and meet that masculine energy if she wants that same equality, but it means that she has to do things differently too, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, very much true. We will be spending a lot of time actually with Venus and Aries here because it will station retrograde. You said that was March.
First.
Yeah, it will station retrograde and spend even more time in Aries. So we'll have a lot of time actually with kind of understanding that
Yeah.
relationship. Yeah.
So, I mean, for yourself, you want to look at the Aries part of your chart, what house that is, and Venus is going to want to put more ease there, but also maybe take more action there and just in a different way. But then also know that that action in ease is probably going to be reversed or reviewed or like come back around to. And I don't know, there's so much going on in Aries, so that's definitely an area you need to be like looking to, especially for the spring.
Yeah. I think another thing that might come up is like this idea of like individualism, like
Mm,
Venus likes to like rely on community and like be resource socially. And Aries is very much like the independent soldier, like the independent person. It's very I focused. Um,
yeah.
so I think a lot of us might be feeling the effects of like what being hyper individualistic like means actually, or how that makes us feel. Um, yeah, I think a lot of us will be coming to terms with that.
Yeah, maybe a review of like, or a kind of a retreat or retraction of like, hey, we were so hyper individualistic for so long. Like maybe that's not exactly how we can move forward anymore, you know?
Mhm.
Because she does retrograde all the way back into Pisces. And so there's a piece of like needing that community connection in a space that maybe you were more independent and individualistic in.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So something we'll talk more about for sure later. Um, on the 4th as well, that Tuesday, that's when Jupiter does station direct.
Yay.
So, yay, I know. And we'll be direct all the way until it moves into Cancer and then the summer, I think June. But so yeah, this is oh, I'm so excited for this.
I know, right? Yeah, so we got a good thing going with Jupiter now because it's been retrograde for the past 6 months, if I'm not mistaken.
I think so, right? It was like September or so.
Yeah, I mean, I'd have to look at the exact date.
October. It was October.
So October, November, December, January, February, about 5 months.
Yeah, like yeah.
Six, yeah, something
Yeah,
around
it's
there.
like 4 or 5, it's like 5 months ish. That's when you were reviewing. So, I mean, really the progression of Jupiter was like Jupiter entered Gemini in May of 2024, and it was direct all the way up till October. And then it's now retrograde all the way back, and now it's going to move direct again. So it's going to feel more like forward expanding movement. Like I really felt like the Jupiter and Gemini was so much like, okay, you said all these things, you believed all these things, like, are they actually true? They actually hold any weight? Do you actually want to do that? And now
Mm.
you're actually like committing to that expansion piece. And it should feel more fluid, like things are coming in a line now that you reviewed if you actually want that or not?
Yeah, well, I feel like even like when Jupiter like ingressed into Gemini, like you said, we had all these like plans of like things that we wanted to change and directions that we wanted to expand in. And then when Jupiter went retrograde, we had to review, I think, every action that we were taking that went against the ways that we said we wanted to expand. So, as it moves direct again, I think now we're getting to be like, okay, like I don't have to, continue to act in those ways or do those things. Like now I've seen like the crimes of my actions and now I get to like move forward. And I think you kind of get like a clean slate and when Jupiter moves into Cancer, it's exalted there. So I think we will feel like even more like, ooh, yay. Get to
Yeah.
get to like really move forward with my actions.
Right, like Jupiter and Gemini is another example of a detriment planet where you're taking in so much information, you're taking in all these ideas, and it's like, I mean, for me, what I was noting about it is like when it finally goes direct, it's like okay, choose like the one or couple things that you are going to just continue to expand on. Like maybe the first part of Jupiter and Gemini was like, oh, this and this and this and this and this.
Everything, yeah. Hmm.
It's like, okay, Jupiter loves that, but in Gemini is not resourced to do that.
Right.
It's like Gemini is like, no, there's too many details that you need to pay attention to that you're neglecting. And so you realize that through the retrograde, and now you're like, okay, these two things or this one thing is actually really important for me to just zero in on and get clear about and expand into.
Yeah, for sure. I agree with you. Yeah.
So that will feel good. But amidst all that, like it's still slow this week, so it's maybe not know as much this week. But then, then on the 6th, of Thursday, that's when the North Node is going to conjunct Neptune exactly in Pisces.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, there's still not clarity yet for
Yeah.
sure. Like, there's definitely not an ironed out plan yet, you
No,
know?
like the North Node, all of us collectively are experience the North Node as like this is like the theme for like the next year and a half of like what we will be individually working towards like expanding in some way or working towards embodying, I think would be like a better example of that. And Neptune is so confusing that we're going to be like, wait, what is that we are actually doing? Why do I exist? And what am I moving towards, you know?
Right. And like, what is real? Like, Neptune being the mystical planet and like the fog and the underlayers of real, like, what is even real anymore? Like,
Mm.
what is the thing that I need to zero in or focus on? There's a lot of confusion still around that. There will be space because Neptune will enter Aries. So now there'll be space between Neptune and the North Node for a little bit. But at the moment, there's like none of that right now.
No, no, there's not. I think that also like is very representational though of what could be going on like on a larger scale too. Like a lot of people being confused with like what's actually, like you said, what's happening like in life. Like
Right.
we don't know where things are
No,
headed actually.
no, there's all these things being said, but like
Mm-hmm.
what's actually gonna happen? And then like I do feel like a lot of things that are being said are going to be reversed because of Jupiter going direct,
Mm. I could
you
see that.
know?
Yeah.
And then like but then you're left with this like, do I trust anything kind of energy, which is North Node and Neptune.
True. Yeah. Hmm. So
So
it's a good time to see too how like what your relationship is like to Neptune.
yeah. Yeah. How
Yeah.
comfortable are you with the unknown? How comfortable are you with spiritual matters that are not grounded in anything? What are your beliefs that shape your reality?
Yeah, for sure. I was reading like some astrocartography stuff and it was like, whenever you move to like a new planetary line, you just like to be able to understand like what to expect on that line, you have to understand like your individual relationship with that planet. So it's just like we can try to understand through all of these different transits and what happens where, like, what's my relationship to this planet, you know? And I think that can clue us in too to like our personality as a whole. Like, I don't know. What don't I like? What planet don't I like? I mean, I say that I don't like Mars, but I feel like I do like it to some degree.
Well, we all need it, right? We
Yeah.
need every planet in our chart. Like that's the purpose of them being there.
Hmm.
So maybe, but I do feel like, yeah, like other times, like I used to neglect my Saturn so much. Like I just ignored it a lot or like didn't put energy into it. And now
Yeah.
obviously I'm like smack middle of my Saturn return. Like now I
Kind of more
realize how,
and more. Yeah.
yeah, how necessary the pieces of Saturn is. And same thing with Neptune. Like maybe you don't put a lot of energy into your Neptune or like Neptune in general and yourself. And like this is the time to be like, okay, where's even Neptune in my chart? And like, what does that mean for me? Like, it's generally in your chart where you want to feel more oneness and more spiritual and have more sort of idea. You may have more idealistic notions about that area of your life.
Hmm.
And embracing that piece for yourself, like this good North Node conjunct Neptune energies, because honestly, nothing practical is probably going to happen this week.
No. But it can also be, Neptune can also be healing, you know?
Yeah.
can also allow us to embrace the unknown or surrender to something greater. Um,
Right.
and that point can be really pivotal, actually.
Yeah, I agree. So that's just something to reflect on. And then we will end this week on Friday. Venus in Aries will make a sextile to Pluto in Aquarius. I don't know. I mean, sextiles are the aspect that Venus rules.
Mm.
And we've had a lot of tough conjunctions with Pluto.
Hmm.
Maybe there's some sort of ease with the connections of the power dynamics we were having, or like an awareness of how we can connect to either overcome or claim power back. Ooh, that would be a good one with Venus and Aries, take power back for ourselves, but also that's the individual portion, but also collectively, like with their connections. And so,
Yeah, I could definitely see like it manifesting as people wanting to take their individual power back in one
right.
way or another. Um, I think we're gonna have to figure out how to do that, like where we're just gonna be trying to understand like where do we have power and
Mm,
yeah, like how does that exist? I think we all are pretty unclear on like what our individual power looks like.
right.
So like we don't know like in the midst of the whole system. So
Yeah.
yeah.
It is very much like we don't know. And then maybe Venus and Aries is trying to grasp, right? Like, what do you have control over? Where are you involved in with your community? And then how, with the sextile of Pluto, how can you uplift your community or create a feeling? Like, really, that's ultimately what we need is like a feeling of having power back in our lives, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And like, what actions do you end up taking together in some sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because that's all we really have to rely on is each other, you know? When there's like when we're all separated by like these class structures and things like that, we kind of just like gotta look to our neighbors and be like, hey, you still there? Like you got,
Right.
yeah, you do have me because I have you, like we gotta
Right.
bind together in some way.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And I think personally, on a smaller scale, like you'll be looking to maybe Venus and Aries, like where you're starting to gain maybe more power, working within relationships that make you feel more powerful, like smaller one-on-one relationships or just relationships in general. And wherever that is, how does that help you gain power? Like, where are the areas of life that Venus rules in your chart? And then where's Aries? And maybe that's a place for you of where
Hmm.
you do have individual power that can help other people too.
Yeah, maybe you don't even know like what your power looks like there. So you could be getting information like, hey, you're a little bit more powerful in this area of life than you thought.
And that can be a space that you kind of Aries, right? Like zero in on as like putting your efforts and actions too.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Aries is meant to be like the leader in some way.
Mm,
You're meant to like, um, how do you call that? Like go like the first. I don't know what I'm so trying to say, but you're meant to be like the leader. It's another word
right.
for it. So, in this area of your chart, you're supposed to be very initiative, and that can be helpful for other people who need to follow somebody in that area. So, like you said, you're like awakening to like this is where you're supposed to lead in one way or another.
I like that.
Yeah.
I like that. That's something to reflect on for this week. So
Hmm.
yeah. It's a softer week, but I think it will give us a minute to breathe and like catch up and maybe sit amongst the confusion, but also, take a break, go slow, find the things that you enjoy doing, and then use that as like your source of power to move forward and where you want to take action and move forward too.
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
All right. So if you want more content from us, just follow us on all the socials, mainly TikTok, Instagram, YouTube at Two Girls Talk Transits. We are on Substack as well, Two Girls Talk Transits, and I think that's all we have.
Yeah, that's it for now.
And we'll see you next week.
See you.
Bye.